Uh, so we will call this workshop meeting to order. So there's no formal business to be taken tonight. So I don't get to bang the gavel because we're all on Zoom, which I know you guys know distresses me greatly. The purpose of tonight is to get a run through of all the work that staff have been doing behind the scenes, preparing for sort of the prioritization of the items in our Project Lunenburg strategic plan. So I'm going to give a bit of a welcome, which I'm doing now. Then B is going to run us through the plan, with Dawn running us through the examples of how things have been scored. And then Lisa, I believe, will walk us through the tentative schedule for the budgeting process and look at how that all aligns and how we're going to move this work forward. So with that, I will turn the floor over to B for her presentation.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone, and I thank you for your participation in this first council management workshop, where we're focusing on the CCP weighting analysis and its alignment with the development of our 2021 and 22 budget. Heather, if you can turn to the next slide, we'll provide an overview of our presentation objectives for this evening. And they're threefold. First is to provide council with an overview of the CCP annual weighting and prioritization exercises that have recently been conducted by the town's management team since council approved the CCP on November 17th. We'll also do a review of the 35 strategic direction goal action rankings, and we'll focus on those that are prioritized for the upcoming fiscal year. As well, an alignment of these actions with the town's upcoming budget development will be provided. And we hope that this will lay the foundation for council and staff to proceed with the next steps in the budgeting process that, as you mentioned, Your Worship, Lisa will be commenting on further detail. We'll next provide an overview of the management team's evaluation process that we've done to date. We've had so far 16 meetings that were held to apply the CCP scoring matrix and the weights for 35 strategic direction goal actions. And this required a high level of staff commitment and consensus building. We discussed the CCP steps to implementation and any additional work affecting project timelines, giving an example here of perhaps a utility rate study that might underline any action moving forward. Next, we consider timeframes for each project implementation to achieve the steps for each action item. And we have started to assign lead team departments for these 35 actions. And we'll go through that with you in greater detail. The management team also individually and collectively reviewed the 35 action sheets found in the CCP. And the illustration on the right-hand side of this slide is an inset from that document to provide an example to you. As well, we evaluated Upland's 5-year prioritization framework for these 35 actions. We noted with interest that Upland had actually pre-screened 65 total actions, and from that distilled it to 35 actions for the next 5 years to look forward to implementing those key action items. To do this, Upland used 6 criteria with a range of weighted values, and this process was quite unique for many of us, myself included, and we'd like to run through that with you in a little greater detail. This is the 5-year weighting analysis that Upland's provided for us, and we'll describe to you the contents of that. It's found on pages 187 through to 188 in the CCP document. Under the first heading of community building, you'll see in green in the first line, there are 4 subsets, the first being capacity building, and that scores an action on the extent to which it can be accomplished using existing local resources, such as town staff, and its ability to expand upon that. It's received a weighting, as you can see, of 10%. The next component is community benefit, also with a weighting of 10%. And that examines an action on the urgency of the issues it addresses. the proportion of the population affected, and its ability to positively affect Lunenburg's sustainability. Next, coming in with a weight of 15% is equity benefit. This assesses more specifically whether an action targets or addresses any equity-seeking group. Some examples given were low-income households or new immigrants to the community. The final component of that subset is immediacy of impact with a weighted average of 10% as well. And it scores an action based on the immediacy of the impact, as per the title, with categories for impacts felt within a variety of years, and the ranges that were provided were 1 through to 5 years, or perhaps even longer. The next subheading we see also noted in green is community preference, with the subcategory of community desire. And it had a high weighting of 35%. And it divides actions which are supported by the majority of the community or portions thereof. Next is enabling fundamentals. And it's defined as actions without which many other actions would not be possible. An example was given of data collection. But partial points can also be gained by actions which enable some other actions but are not necessarily essential. And it had a fairly high weighting as well of 20% for a combined total of 100%. And if, like myself, you may find some of these terms and processes a bit confusing, Dawn will go through an exercise of that weighting process, so you'll see it actually in play. But we did want to just go through these first primary weighting exercises and the charts that have been provided. You may ask, how did Uplands actually determine these weightings and the apportionments? Well, they're not specifically based on any formula, rather it was customized for the CCP process itself. Much of it is based upon community values, community input through a range of activities, and also the professional judgment based on Upland's research of other frameworks and best practices they surveyed. From there, we examined the CCP's annual review analysis process. Appendix A, as many of you may be familiar with, found in the Comprehensive Community Plan, provides a more detailed matrix for the management team to annually score and prioritize these projects. It helps to provide a further alignment with the annual budgeting process that we're undertaking. To arrive at this, Upland used a combined weighting factor. They took 50% of the previous community values we just described, including community building, community preference, and the enabling fundamentals. And to that, they added an additional 50% weighting factor, spreading across additional categories. And as we see those highlighted in green on that inset chart, that included financial, action assessments, and an economic assessment with varying weightings assigned there for, again, a combined total of a 100% weighting. We wanted to just comment, though, on what some of those components under financial and action and economic included. They did include such items as the capital finance requirements for a particular action item or project, operating budget impact, the degree to which it may bring about community well-being and public health benefits, the environmental impact of such an action, potential project risks, as well the strategic alignment of that action, service levels, and an overall economic impact. At this juncture, Dawn will, who has had some oral surgery today, so we're very appreciative of her joining us today under those circumstances particularly. We'll take you through the next steps of our presentation, and this focuses on a weighting process for the two key actions which achieve the highest weighting rankings by management staff. And to summarize, they are first, to plan and make upgrades to the town's wastewater collection and discharge system. And it achieved an annual weighted score of 85%. The second is upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant itself with a close weighted score of 82.5%. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Dawn, who does need to upload some additional screens. So if you could just bear with her, thank you.
Sorry, couldn't find the unmute. Okay. So the purpose here, we looked at all 35 action sheets. And what I want to do tonight is I want council to have a look at these and try to understand where the scoring came from, which led to all the rankings. So this is the behind the scenes. So we took the 35 action sheets for implementation and monitoring. The team, the senior management team, read through the summaries, talked about them, tried to understand what Upland was describing. So we'd have a really in-depth knowledge of it. We looked at the costs, the estimated costs, as you can see on your screen. We also looked at the scores, the community building, community desires, and enabling fundamentals, and discussed that. And then we looked at the steps to implementation for all of these. So for this one, conduct capital maintenance on the pump stations, replace if necessary as per the 2019 Lunenburg Process Support Lift Station Memorandum, and separate your combined storm and wastewater sewers. So under the steps to implementation, we note that the steps may involve more than one project. It's more like a series of steps. So it's not just one implementation. It's implementation through a number of steps or projects. So it's just so you understand where that comes from. So the first round, there was it took a lot of time. There was much discussion, just so we could understand the implementation itself. So in the first round, we talked about how long it was going to take. So we assigned a duration, the time length here for all the steps, and we assigned lead departments. So we may have people from other departments, but the lead department here would obviously be Public Works. In the second round, we did the actual scoring. Because this took so long, this took hours, 6 hours of management time. So we had to break it up over a series of meetings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the, I'm going to go through what staff did. So you'll have an understanding of when we say it was ranked 85, where does that 85 come from? I'm going to try to stay on task too, which is going to be hard for me. So this one is our number one ranking. It was just number 9 in the order. So here it is under servicing and facilities, 4.2 E to H. Plan and make upgrades to the wastewater collection and discharge system. That's on page 202, I think it is. So before we start, I want to draw your attention to the different values at the top. So there's criteria, comes under capacity building, a description. You see, there's a whole bunch of these we went through. Then there's a scoring description and the maximum value, which we scored out. Then the score is weighted. Weighted score is then used for the final ranking. In maximum value, it's not, it's an all or nothing type of thing. It's not like, oh, you know, let's think about community is partially able to undertake the action and will marginally build upon local resources. Maybe that's a 54, maybe that's a 52. No, if it fits in that descriptor, it's a 50. If it fits in the community is able to undertake the action and builds upon local resources, it's 100. It's not a 97. The only time you'd go back in is if you had 2 that ranked the same. Say if you had 2 number 17s, then you would go in and discuss how you would like probably make this a 52 or a 54. That's the only time that there's that much subjectivity to it. The rest of it is pretty objective. So for this one, we did this, it's 50. Community is partially able to undertake action and marginally build upon local resources. So we have some capacity in-house to help with this, but we can't do it all by ourselves. So that was a 50. And I just broke them up into different colors just so staff could have better focus on them. So community benefit, the overall impact on the Lunenburg community, including the impact on health and well-being and social determinants of health. Well, obviously, upgrading the wastewater treatment plant would a great benefit. Action addresses an urgent issue. We all know that. And will benefit the physical and mental well-being of the majority of the community. Action will lead to greater sustainability of the community and impact future generations. So that scored 100. And I should say also, they're not all 150-0, or they're all customized. They're all individualized. So you'll see different score maximum values throughout the different criteria here. How immediate is the effect? Completing the action will bring an immediate impact, less than 1 year. So that's 100. Community desire is high. Action is supported by the majority of the community, but individual or groups may still disagree with the action. This one ranked really high on community preference. So this was identified by staff or the town and council, as well as in the community. Fundamentals, a lot of things build upon this. So see, it ranked high out of 50 for the more for the community engagement, values, background. Then we get into more of the financial aspect of it. So how the capital costs of the action will be financed. So finance, Lisa and Kathleen were brought in and contributed greatly to this document. So 50 to 74% finance from external sources. So that scores a 50. Impact on operating budget. See here, it goes 100, 50, 25, 0, minus 25, minus 50, minus 100. So it's not the same. It's not the same as the one above it. So this one, moderate decrease in annual operating costs. So it's given a 50. Community well-being and public health. Action expected to have a significant positive impact on community well-being and public health. Obviously, it will. Impact on the environment, that goes without saying, and action has a positive direct impact on the environment, so we scored it 100. The risk, the low degree of risk in the whole project, of real or perceived risk with undertaking this action. Likelihood of failure is low, and there is a low degree of difficulty, and it will likely stay on budget. So once we secure the funding, it will most likely be done. Strategic alignment is 100. All of these are 100 because they're all in alignment with the plan. Service levels, the action addresses a current service level deficiency or increases the level of town services. So that was scored 100. Economic impact, a lot of spin-offs with this. We all know that, housing, we have difficulty with our services in terms of impact on the services with growth, right? That was identified in the CCP. So this was scored as 100. So this is our highest score. It's 85 out of 100. I'll go through this is the number 2. There we go, sorry. This is the number 2 ranking, and it is upgrades to wastewater treatment plant. And that's 4.2 A to D. And that's, again, under servicing and facilities. So our top 2 were servicing and facilities. So under this one is conduct appropriate studies, design and budget for upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant. This is already underway, right? Clearly communicate the plans, costs, and challenges and benefits to citizens. So there's an engagement aspect to this as well. Capacity building. So we're not able to do it all by ourselves, but can we contribute to it? Yes. So it's 50. Again, it's an urgent issue. So scored at 100. Oops. Yep. I'm losing myself here. Addresses an equity seeking group in the community. It addresses everyone. So they are included. They're not excluded. Instantaneous. So this is going to take a while to do, right? So completing the action requires some level of ground laying with the impact in the community felt between 1 and 5 years after implementation. So that's a 50. Community desire. Action is supported by the majority of the community. That's true. Fundamentals. Action is an underlying essential. Without it, many other actions will not be possible. That's the same with the other one. 50, finance 50% to 74% for an external. And we had a lot that we went through that you know, we didn't have any external sources. So it would have been financed entirely from debt, reserve, or unknown. This is not the case with this one, but there were many that were. So it would score lower. Impact on the operating budget. That's a 50. Moderate decrease in annual operating costs. Action is expected to have a significant positive impact on community well-being and public health, as it should at 100. Action has direct positive impacts on the environment. Yes, wastewater treatment. This is the same with a project, low degree of risk. Alignment is high. Service levels will be increasing, 100. And the action has potential to generate a significant economic and community benefit. And that's, again, that's 100. So this one scored a little bit lower, and it was more on the economic side, I believe. And so with 82.5, I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to try. Did it go away, Heather? Yes, it worked. Yay. Okay. So this is our master document that finance, I think Kathleen and Lisa worked on. It's a magical document that they won't let me touch. It's all linked through different spreadsheets. When you change one thing, another thing has changes on it. This is how we came up with the ranking. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing it. So this spreadsheet has the evaluation metrics. That should be metrics on it. The goal here is this is the upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, is a town where long-term infrastructure needs of the community are met through strategic management and incremental, well-phased upgrades that are financially sustainable. So it has the linkages between the strategic actions and the sections of the CCP. So if you see here, there are the metrics there. There's also the section, waste 4.2, wastewater A to D, and I have those. I'll just read them so you'll have an idea of what this means. So A to D, A is introduce operations and maintenance improvements at the treatment plant that will extend its useful lifespan. B is upgrade the wastewater treatment plant, taking into consideration the seasonal demands, flood risks, collection system factors, and town growth capacity needs. C is perform flood proofing measures at the wastewater treatment plant to prepare for future storm events using 3D flood modeling simulations. And D is extend the sewer outfall beyond visibility from the waterfront. So that's what it pertains to. You have to go back and forth through the documents. The metrics here, just an example of what a metric is. It's a measurement. How are we going to measure this? How do we know how we're doing? So I'm not going to read them all, but measure the operating costs for the provision of water, wastewater, and stormwater for residents. So we have to measure that. Total length of separated stormwater and wastewater. And another one is the length of underground electrical services. So that might be if we have that in a new subdivision bylaw or we bury some. We also have on here the time periods. There's a ranking and the time periods. These are budget years. So what we do is we would assign a budget year, it would start and stop, and that will translate into the Gantt chart. We also have on here the length of time, and that will also feed into your Gantt chart. So you know, if it's over 3 years, it'll be 3 years across budget years. We also have the lead departments on here as well. So that's just a little overview of the master spreadsheet. I mean, it's a work in progress. It will get bigger as we work on it, but that's what that is. It's basically the linkages, and it's how and then we derive the rankings from this master spreadsheet. So we can go to the next one. So these are the rankings from the different Excel spreadsheets. I'll run through the top 10. of them. Okay, let's just start. The first one ranked an 85, and the action is to plan and make upgrades to the wastewater collection and discharge system. Very close to it is number 2, upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, and these are the 2 examples that I went through. The third one is reform municipal committees to build a culture of inclusion. 4th is enhance relationships with surrounding communities and municipalities. And the 5th one is partnerships to encourage energy efficiency retrofits. You could flip it. The 6th one is plan for long-term of all municipal facilities, including renovation, sales, or lease. And the 7th one, so our top 7, deepen work with local and regional partners in the provision of shared services. So that's ongoing for 2 years, $10,000. So that's our top 7. When we go to 8, it's planning and study and planning for sustainable energy districts. 9 is expand the town's communication plan to include a public participation strategy. That would be engagement strategy for everything. It's not just planning, because we have for heritage and planning, we have like public participation strategies. I have one for planning. Arthur has one for heritage. This is a little different. This is an engagement strategy. And then the last one in the top 10 is site planning for Blockhouse Hill. And we rank them all. So we have 35 of these. Heather, if you could just flip and show, like, they're all ranked. They're all ranked. You can have a look at them. I think we're going to put these on SharePoint. So my big takeaway here is that I feel the scoring worked well. The forefront of the community and town staff and council is our big issue is wastewater treatment, the sewage treatment plant, all the economic spin-offs from that. They're fundamentals. So other projects build on them, other actions build on them. Other things related are, economic growth, housing, the environment. So they bring in a number of different aspects for our top 2. The top 10, I think, is really reflective of what is going on in the world and not just in our community. The top 10 have to do with the environment, so sustainability, inclusion, communication, engagement, partnerships and relationship building. And then we had facilities and Blockhouse Hill. So those are our top 10. What I didn't see on the top 10 is short-term rentals. We heard a lot about housing and Airbnb. That scored out at 17. That's probably because some of the implementation steps needed to have enabling legislative changes. So that could be why, the immediacy of it as well. Also, streetscapes, activate streetscapes came in at 19. And this is not to say we can't do 19. It's just the top priorities listed were, from 1 to 10 or 1 to 7, had more immediate things that we can do. And Upland had 65. And then they went to 35 because they thought 35 was much better than 65, much more doable. And then the other one I came out at 29 was parking outside of the core. And we heard a lot about parking, but is it a #1 priority? Let's look at our treatment plant, the environment. Let's look at more inclusion. Let's build some partnerships, deal with our facilities, and take a look at Blockhouse Hill. So that's my takeaway. I think that's everything for me. I'll give that back to B now. So I think that the scoring worked. It came out pretty good.
Thank you, Dawn, for that excellent overview. It's a lot of material, and we'd certainly be very pleased to answer any questions council may have at the end, or if you want to ask any questions at this time. Otherwise, we'll proceed with the next steps of the CCP implementation process as we see it from management's perspective. So just give you a moment to see if there's any questions. Okay. So save them for later because there'll certainly be time before Lisa provides an overview of the budgeting process that we've prepared for your consideration. So management team's next step includes the development of a Gantt chart, providing, as you see here, a visualization of the CCP project schedule for the 35 actions that Dawn has just reviewed with you. And that Gantt chart will show such things as timelines for its implementation, when projects will start, their duration, and perhaps some components along the way. We will require some additional time to do these exercises because of the current focus or recent focus has been on these weighting exercises, and we'll integrate more involvement with departments such as our fire department and recreation department, who have been presented with some time challenges for participating to date. Turning to our next slide, we did want to mention, though, in the development of the Gantt chart, there are some challenges to that. And Heather, if you wanted to go to the next screen, thanks very much. We've noted that there are multiple projects that are contained in some actions, and they will in turn require additional analysis in that Gantt chart. The Gantt chart, I think as Dennis pointed out, and he's had a lot of experience with project managements and Gantt chart preparations, is that it needs to show the interdependency of some projects. We've provided an illustration here of that, taking an excerpt from the CCP document and noting in it some of the steps to implementation. So here we see the action item of improving connectivity between old and new towns for all modes of transportation. And to achieve that, Project Lunenburg identified 3 subset actions: the issuance of an RFP for certain work regarding particular streets, interconnectivity of the Victoria, Falkland, Lincoln access is noted, and then perhaps winter trail maintenance for the Front Harbor Trail and other methodologies of active transportation improvements. So those will all have to be reflected and incorporated in the development of that Gantt chart. Turning to the next component of the CCP implementation, it'll focus on budget refinement. The management team will center their activities on determining more accurate action item costs. Currently, in our CCP document, you'll note that there are only ranges that are provided, and they're indicated by dollar symbols, some having a nominal or minimal value, as shown in the top of that chart, and others that could exceed $10 million or more. And turning to the next slide, Heather. Thank you. So to achieve that, we'll have to try and do our best to determine more precise costing, but it is difficult at this early stage. And as we've seen through the recent wastewater treatment project, where we're doing pre-design concept engineering, that might just help to achieve what we see on this chart, the colorful inset chart, is a class estimate of D for cost refinement, the highest ranking being A, where you have more particulars and greater accuracy for budgeting purposes. So it's a multi-stage process to achieve that. However, we are very hopeful that more information about costing will become available as we go through project scoping exercises that'll include such initiatives as requests for proposals, tender calls, and the like. The next significant CCP implementation phase is the draft budget development itself. And as Dawn has highlighted for you, management staff have pared down the 35 recommendations or actions into 7 key actions for inclusion in the 2021-22 budget. And to recap as follows, we are identifying the upgrades to the wastewater collection and discharge system, the wastewater treatment plant retrofit, as you saw firsthand during your recent tour, the reformation of municipal committees, particularly to address the issue of inclusivity. We need to enhance our relationships with our surrounding municipalities. The fifth item is to look at our energy efficiency retrofit project opportunities with our community members. 6 is to plan for the long-term use of our facilities, but that may also include disposal, either through a full sale or leases of a shorter long-term nature. And the final one, as Dawn has mentioned, is to deepen our work with local regional partners, and particularly in the area of shared services. In the next slide, we describe more fully how management will endeavor to reach these objectives. We will develop the cost estimates in greater certitude, as we hope. We'll outline action subsets. As we've mentioned before, one of the 35 actions may have 3 or 4 subsets to it of additional components of actions that need to be achieved overall to achieve one main action. We'll identify those actions that may already be in process. So I think when Dawn went through that 35 action item review with you, you'll say, well, hey, some of those we're already working on, which is great. And we'll make sure they have a place within the budget document for the upcoming year. As well, we'll start making preparations for the first quarterly CCP report. And we know Council will want to weigh in that extensively to make sure that it reflects the information and reporting to the public that you view as critical. We'll also develop and compile CCP evaluation metrics, and more of that is covered in the next slide, Heather. We've provided 2 examples also from the CCP document and the inset to the right. We note that many of these metrics are data intensive. They will require statistics being gathered, for which at the current time, we don't actually know where some of this information will come from. It'll take some research. It may take supplemental resources. So that's why we've noted, and it will have to appear somewhere in the draft budget process, we'll need these external resources to help us compile that data and to provide a reporting framework that ensures good accountability to the public. We're coming near the end of our presentation, so thank you for your patience as we get through this volume of material. And most critically, to ensure the CCP's implementation success. The document itself notes that there's some first steps we have to consider, and we'd like to just highlight those for you now. We think that they are very achievable, but there will be some financial and timing consequences associated with them. The first being is ensuring we have sufficient staff resources. We'll need to reach out to potential partners to determine opportunities, and we'll have to review relevant policies and documents. And as part of that, we're finding ourselves, of course, in the processes of adapting to what we hope will soon be a post-pandemic environment. And that's very much going to affect funding opportunities, both within the town's tax base and external funding source availability that we have been very successful in the past in securing. We have to remember that the CCP was conceived before the pandemic, and we have to be mindful of this to ensure reasonable measures of success in the unique environment we now find ourselves in. As well, and as we've previously noted, the internal capacity of our small staff composition and the addition of the CCP implementation now has already seen some impacts in workloads. And we have to keep that in mind, as well as the importance of maintaining support for our existing operating and capital functions that we have been working on. In conclusion, we also need to measure and celebrate this success through the quarterly management progress reports that we've touched on and annual public reports by council. And this concludes Dawn and my formal comments, but I did want to extend my appreciation to all of the town staff who have assisted in various ways with the preparation of tonight's presentation. It's truly been a team effort on all of their parts, and I'm very grateful for the extra time and energy so many of them have put into making this very extensive weighting exercise, I'm sure you'll agree, possible. And this is, again, just 1 month after council's adoption of the CCP that we've managed to achieve this. So my thanks and congratulations to them. And at this time, your worship, Dawn and myself would be pleased, or any of the other management team members who were participating, to answer any questions you may have. I don't know if you wish to also take a break perhaps before Lisa provides an overview of the budgeting process that's outlined in your agenda. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll open it up to questions, and then if we need a break, we'll take one. So are there any questions on the presentation? I see Councillor Sanford.
I just was, as I was listening to the very last part of the presentation, wait a second, I have to stop, sorry. I want to say job well done for all of the work that all of you have pulled together and been able to present and share with us tonight. So I want to say thank you. And I found it very helpful, especially at the beginning, B, where you walked us through how things happened, and then Dawn carried it down to the next level of how things were weighted, explained it further. I found all of that very helpful. And I want to say thank you, because I can't even imagine the work that went into making all of that happen by staff as a group. Having said that, I have a question about at the end of the presentation, when you were talking about the set, it got reduced down from 10 maybe to 7 action items in the next year that's coming up. I was wondering what happened to the planning for housing development part, or where does that fit into those 7 action items that came at the end?
Dawn or Heather, did you want to bring that up and comment on that?
Blockhouse Hill?
I'll find the slide. Stand by.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I think it was specifically mentioned earlier as Blockhouse Hill, but
Yeah.
I guess for me, it wouldn't have to necessarily be Blockhouse Hill. It's really just that housing development piece.
Okay, I think that's, we got papers everywhere. The alternative housing models. There was that one, that was 25.
Yeah, I think Blockhouse Hill took
Yeah.
numbers higher or ranked as more important. But even if it were the backyard suites or whatever, but what the aspect of housing development seemed to have gotten lost in this next year move forward piece.
Oh, it wasn't in
Or-
the top 10
Right.
or the top 7. Right.
It was in the top 10, but it didn't make it to the top 7.
Right.
So there would be the opportunity, and I think your worship, you'll be commenting on that further about the next phases of review through this workshop process, where council will no doubt want to conduct its own weighting analysis, challenge that's been done by staff, and we can walk through. I mean, we could do it this evening for some of those projects if you wanted to do in greater detail, to challenge staff as to why those rankings were determined as such for some of those projects, such as housing, as you've identified. I have to say, I had ones that I thought
Yeah, me too.
I ranked them much higher. Won't necessarily tell you which ones, but and they were near the bottom of the list. So that's part of that collaborative process.
Well, yeah, I think, thank you, B. Challenge is a strong word, but I think the point is that this is a good exercise and that it forces the organization to do a lot of thinking, but it's also a quasi-subjective. It's more of a craft than a science, insofar as, you know, some of these rankings could be subjective or disputed, which is good because it generates lots of discussion and debate. I think Councillor Mosier, were you done, Councillor Sanford?
Yes. Yep.
I think Councillor Mosier's itching to weigh in.
Yeah, thanks. Bravo, B. Well done. Your presentation's well done, and the presentation itself, it is a lot of work there, and we certainly appreciate staff bringing that forward to us. And I too, like, I mean, it's the same. These rankings are difficult because you know, when I first looked at it, I just looked at how it was ranked, and I thought, oh, that doesn't seem right to me. And then I looked at the weightings, and then it made more sense. But I think too, you know, to Dennis's point too, I think the interdependencies are going to adjust some of these things as well. And then there's some political adjustments that we'll make as council probably. And just because something might be ranked 35, it still could be initiated in the first year. It just doesn't necessarily, it's not lost because I guess because it's not in the top 10. I mean, 35 could be, we could start that next week. It just may not, it may make more sense to start 35 tomorrow than it does to start number 1, because even in the number 1 thing, I noticed, some of those things are almost ongoing things that we would do regardless. If we had any plan, we'd still be probably doing some of these things. So, but overall, very, very impressive. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Motor. Yeah, and I would note that it's like many of the items are multi-year items, so it's not as if we're going to be banging out. When the Gantt chart comes back, it's not as if it's going to be 7 a year, 1 year apiece. Any further questions from council on this? All right. Hearing none. So, I mean, I think this is a lot this was a lot for you guys to compile, and it's certainly a lot for us to digest. So I think it's, we do have a second and have tentatively and Peter and I have talked about even a third potential workshop to work through this before it's finalized and approved by council. So I think the purpose of tonight is sort of intake for council. So give some thought to this, prior to our next one is January 18th, which I think Lisa will run through. Is everybody good to keep going, or do people need a break?
I will say, Your Worship, I'm only going to be maybe 5 minutes. So.
All right, well then let's just go on. So what Lisa's going to do is just speak to the budget, the tentative budget process, and how this budgeting and annual planning and everything is going to come together.
So thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just had a few brief notes at this point, because yes, it is a lot of information that council has before them to digest this evening. So as mentioned previously, since November 17th, when council approved the CCP, Kathleen and I, like the rest of the management team, have been immersed in the CCP implementation. And for us, that meant participating in the weighting exercises and development of the implementation summary, and being part of the team that prepared for the presentation this evening. So beginning in January, after the holidays, we will be coming back, and finance staff will be focusing on the development of the 21-22 operating and capital budgets. We have already circulated budget sheets to the management team to assist them with the incorporation of the town's new strategic plan goals, as well as continuing to deliver our core municipal services. We do, as noted during the presentation, we'll have to remember that in 21-22, it's still going to be a challenging year financially as the COVID-19 pandemic continues with its stresses on the global and local economy. We will need to ensure that we have time to analyze and provide strong financial guidance while our community navigates the restart of the economy. We will be working on debt ratios for you, tax rate implications, assisting managers in program analysis, etc., to ensure that we're attaining our goals while remaining financially stable. And we do have before you this evening a tentative schedule of upcoming meetings, and certainly others can be added to it. But there is on January 18th an opportunity for council to continue your review of the prioritization of the CCP implementation. On February 16th, the management team are targeting to report to council on their departmental visioning exercises and reviewing their priorities for the 21-22 budget. And council will be able to provide input on those items at that meeting or at other meetings that we may need to set. In mid-March at the 16th, staff are targeting to present a draft budget, which would include all those priority items from the February 16th meeting. And council will provide direction for final budget and tax rate options. And that we're targeting towards passing our budget on April 20th, perhaps, which we will present to council with including your recommendations from the middle of March, and perhaps setting the tax rates before the end of that month. So that's all I had this evening, just as a quick summary, Your Worship.
Thank you for that, Lisa. And yeah, so that's tentative. And of course, we'll update that at the January 18th Part 2 workshop. Are there any further questions from councilors on this? Anything that has come to mind? I thank staff for the presentation. It was quite thorough. And I'm sure council appreciates all the work that went into it. Okay, we'll dig into this after the holidays and challenge it then. All right, good night, everyone. Thanks for participating, and, you know, have a, for those of you I may not see, have a happy holiday. It's certainly